This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Robert, Kathryn, and I are going to talk about fight scenes. All right, put up your dukes. Let's go. Are either of you struggling with fight scenes these days?
I feel like I'm always struggling with fight scenes. I feel like I write them in such a weird way.
Oh, good. Let's expand on that, Kathryn.
Yeah, do explain. Yeah.
I like internalize that when things go fast, go slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I've taken that advice and I go slow, 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 and then I just like go boom, 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 done. And so
why?
I end up being like really good through the setup. I feel like I get a really good idea of like a picture of what's about to happen, and then like I run out of blow by blow so fast. Like it just boom, boom, boom. 2 sentences later, it's like I want the impact to hit it the same way that I would feel like it would happen in real life. And so instead of being able to slow it down, I feel like I just rush right through it in an attempt to make it feel hectic or chaotic or frenetic. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
There's my issue with scenes.
Okay. So when you go too quickly through a fight scene, you really risk confusing the reader by not giving enough detail, by using too broad of a brush stroke. And then, you know, we might not always understand why the characters are laying on the floor from what seemed like such a quick and simple fight or something. And there's that real balance that needs to be struck between the choreography of the fight and maintaining the excitement, the adrenaline rush of creating it on the page. Because you as a writer need the choreography to be very clear in your head so that you can then translate it into words for a reader. But when writers go micro level on the choreography, the scene gets bogged down and it becomes tedious, right? So there's a lot of, I find writers put a lot of right hand did this, left shoulder, elbow here, knee there. And it's like, no, we need to sense the bodies in space and all of the contact, but you've also got to maintain the excitement of it.
Right.
So like, I'll just give you straight up the example I was working on this morning. Okay.
So I have my main character, Everett. He's in the dark. He's got this creature coming out at him. He's heard it coming. He's grabbed his gun, right? He's ready to go. You see the creature come around the rock, all the fangs and this crazy skin, and like you see it coming, which is probably, he's probably 15 feet away from it. So technically a whole paragraph of description, I've slowed it down. You get to see all the craziness. And then I go, boom, 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 boom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, creature drops. Right?
Right.
That's where I'm struggling, whether I should take that out and slow it down, or whether it's okay to describe creature running at him and then just have him shoot 5 times in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think is literally like what I wrote. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Wow, concise. Concise prose there. So yes and no. Yes, it's absolutely okay to have your story do whatever you need it to do. So he pulls the trigger 5 times and the creature drops, but don't end the scene there. So we need to be in that point of view character. We need to see how close the creature came to getting him before it dropped. We need to see his chest heaving because the adrenaline, his heart's pounding. Right. We need to, see his attitude now that the creature did drop. Is he like shaken and kind of, oh my God, or is he super cool, no big deal, all in a day's work guy? So, just finish the movement, resolve that note, and don't end it abruptly. And go watch Dances with Wolves, the scene where the buffalo is charging the little boy, the bison, sorry, is charging the little boy. Go watch that. There's some inspiration homework.
There you go.
Yeah, what do you think, Robert?
Is it an actual gun that
Yes.
Everett has used?
Yes.
Yeah. And why does he need to fire 5 times?
He's panicking. He's not actually a soldier, so he's like an engineer in an army unit. So
Right.
he's got a weapon, but he's probably never actually fired it before, other than for training, right? And so he sees this thing coming at him, and he's just like gonna unload on it because he's freaking out.
Right.
So
there's all sorts of things. I'm making suggestions, but you could slow it down by the fact that he's inexperienced. As Alida says, his fear is rising, his chest is tightening. He fires the first shot, and it kind of just grazes the creature, and he's never used the gun before, and the creature's still coming, and he's had to step backwards, and he's stumbling, and the second shot goes wide, and then so there's things you can do to increase the kind of tension factor without necessarily, do the first 3 shots and not stop it because it's such a big creature and he's not expecting that. I think that you can slow it down that way without it still feeling like the reader that you've over choreographed. I have a theory about these things that we probably used to experiencing fight scenes visually because we either watched them in real life or we've watched them in movies, and we have an intense conflict because the written word is purely an expression. It's code. It's neither visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. But what you're trying to do is trying to replicate something that happens in real life so fast in words, which are our slowest form of communication. And so I think that is where it gets tricky, because do you slow it down and then describe every movement? And as Alida says, that can be really boring. But in the right scene, that could be exactly what you need. I'm rereading Jim Butcher's Codex Alera series, and there are times there where the character they have a form of magic called Furies, and where one of the characters uses a windcrafting fury to slow things down, and he often uses it in fight scenes where they slow things down so that everything seems to be happening in slow motion, and yet it's still a really tense fight scene. It's really quite interesting. It'd be interesting to pick one of those apart because the right things are in there. So I'm thinking with yours, that's you could make it just an Indiana Jones bang 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 bang, and the thing's done. But if you want it to be more threatening for the character, then I think you can potentially slow down that thing where people talk about if they've ever been involved in an accident where it feels like their life is going before them, and things sort of slow down. I think you can replicate that experience in words. Where even though in real life he would have gone bang, 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 in words it'd be, the first shot just, flew by the creature's ear, took off a bit of skin and just shook its head in annoyance and continued lumbering towards me or whatever. So, it's a matter of every step ratcheting up that tension, and you could use the in between the bullets to do that, for example. Is the creature bigger than him?
It's basically it's a twisted human, so he doesn't know that yet. But it's a human that's been transformed, so it's like an elongated, kind of stretched human type thing. So
okay, so the fear factor can be part of the fight scene as well. Then those descriptive elements that slip in, not all at once, but after I fired the first shot, a long line of drool came out of the creature's mouth. That's
right.
WTF.
I guess in my brain, like the instinct is, I want it to feel like it's chaotic, right?
The visual
and so it's interesting that like slowing it down instinctually in my little sitting down drafting brain, I'm like, no, it's got to go like all in one sentence, or you end up writing a run-on sentence because you're like, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this, but I can see how that would change the tension, like you were saying, that like would ratchet even between moments.
It depends too on what you're doing with your narrative versus your point of view characters. perspective, because if you're really focused on the close third in that moment, to him, it might just be bang, 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 bang. Was that 5? Because as you say, it's chaotic and he's not experienced, so he's not thinking about it. He's not trying to fire 5 times. He's just unloading. So he's probably not recording whether those bullets are really affecting the beast. He's just in panic mode, but if you are okay with leaving, or if it works for the scene to pull out of that very close third and do more with your narrative exposition, then you can do those descriptions between each bullet and really bring the reader into an experience that the character's not having. The character would probably have to analyze after the fact to know what each of those bullets did, or to have a sense of how effective his shooting was, you know? So that's something else to keep in mind, is where are you in terms of your narrative versus your point of view perspective?
Right, and that makes sense, especially like with Codex Alera, like you were talking about, Robert. I don't know whether you pronounce his name Tavi or Tavi or whatever, but he has the mind that would track that. Like, yes, as a point of view character, he's a strategist. He cares about all those little details. So it would definitely change the way that he would describe or encounter a fight scene versus, my little light engineer who doesn't understand. He knows how to put the weapon together, but he doesn't really know what it would do to a creature at close quarters. You know what I mean?
From the sound of it, it's not really a fight scene in the choreographed sense. It's a defense scene. Mm-hmm. So it might be, as Alida says, perfectly okay that it sounds to me that as if what you feel subconsciously you're missing is some sense of panic and danger. It just happens too quickly.
Right.
Because they haven't engaged in any combat, the creatures or this distorted humans just come around the corner, and so maybe that scene is much more about the fact that it's an inexperienced, nerdy engineer or weak engineer using a weapon for the first time in combat and actually killing something.
Right.
And having a moment of panic about, pulling the trigger and getting it wrong or and not necessarily thinking that in the moment, but could all be about the loud explosions and, the fact that guns are different when they're used not in just engineering analysis.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, and you can think too about the aftermath of the fight scene and how that works into your story, because if he just holsters his gun and walks away, that's very different than if he goes up to the creature and realizes that it's some sort of twisted human, and then he might have guilt over killing something that was a human versus something that's purely monster in the story. So there's a lot to factor in, and if you are going to do a longer end tale on the scene with something like that discovery that the creature used to be human, you might want the actual shooting to go quicker, right? So what is the emphasis of the scene? Is it the actual fighting? Is it the character's emotional response, just getting the reader's adrenaline up? Or is it some aspect of discovery, some kind of reveal you're going to make there?
Right. Yeah, so the fight scene isn't actually just about the fighting. It's about the lead up to the fighting, the actual action of the fighting, and then what happens after.
Right. I mean, it could be. It could just be about the fight. Robert mentioned Indiana Jones, I mean, there are certainly stories where we have a fight just mostly for the sake of having a fight. It should do more than that ultimately, but then there are other stories where the fight scene is really not about the fight. I think it's Tobias Wolff wrote Bullet in the Brain. It's a very short story. Everybody should go read it. This guy gets shot, and the entire story is what happens between the bullet entering his brain and the bullet exiting his brain. And you want to see an example of slowing down time Go read Bullet in the Brain. Yes. Yeah. So what other issues do we have with fight scenes besides managing time and choreography?
Has anyone ever written like a giant scale battlefront type thing? You know, like in Codex Alera or some sort of other like epic story where there's like an actual war scene or a battle scene that's pretty massive.
I've edited some for clients. I haven't written any. How about you, Robert?
No, not where there's been multiple players anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Would you almost have to have multiple points of view in order to handle something that massive, or would your character have to be on the outskirts of it? Like, what have you seen, Alida?
Well, the first one to come to mind is Chris Fox's books. He's got multiple point of view characters and multiple fight scenes, and so in those he does move between the point of view characters, so you see kind of a piece of the battle through this character's perspective, and then you jump over here and you see a piece of the battle, you know, so you move around and you see a lot of action from different angles using these different point of view lenses on what's happening. And of course, in these books, his characters are a team, so it's kind of like two opposing teams, so you're seeing what each member of the team is taking care of in that battle. And he made it work. I would not recommend it for novice writers. It's a lot of juggling going on with all of those points of view and then all the different layers of the action. I think you could certainly write an epic battle with a single point of view character, provided that point of view character is in a position to know what's going on and to be involved in all the right times and places that you need, you know, so someone like a king or a general or a knight, you know, whatever, who is going to understand the big picture and be able to present that to the reader, but also able to enter the battle at ground level and get dirty and experience whatever's going on. You know, and again, it depends on the story you're trying to tell. You could have a single point of view foot soldier going through, you know, something like D-Day, and the point of view is intimate, but the battle is big, right? So it's what do you need to show the reader, and what is your objective with that scene?
Right, because in that example, you're not actually telling the story of D-Day. You're telling the story about that one single soldier, correct? Because your reader's not in expectation for the end of the battle. What's going to happen? How are they going to turn the tide necessarily?
Right. And you are, you know, it is the story of D-Day, but it's through the lens of an individual. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if we see the individual on the boat with his buddies and somebody's hands him a cigarette and somebody's got girly playing cards and we get these snippets of personalities and relationships. And then when our point of view watches one of those guys take a bullet and fall into the bloody water, right, we're experiencing part of the bigger picture through that intimate perspective. So it impacts us as well, even though it's not our POV character, you know, dropping. So there are ways to bring the larger experience into the realm of the intimate story.
Yeah, and I think with those battle scenes as well, the answer, it depends, is always going to come across, I think, with these, because of the fact that it's up to you as to what sort of lens you're using. But we were just talking about, for example, Tavi being more of a strategist. I think what Jim Butcher does quite cleverly is you will have times where he's an observer and watching a battle or even orchestrating it, directing it, and there are times where he's knife to knife with an antagonist. So I think it's again, you've got to think like a film director with fight scenes. You know, when is it got to be close up? When has it got to be far away? And is there enough of variety in that it's going to maintain the reader's interest? Because, as Alida said, if you've got page after page of my fist connected with
right.
her cheek in this way, and then she stabbed a knife into my left thigh, and it can be overly what's the word, pedestrian, so it's interesting that you can make a fight scene pedestrian by putting the wrong details in, yet we're all saying, or not we're all saying, but we're saying slowing things down can make them seem more tense. So it's the right things that you've got to slow down and leave out the detail that doesn't need to be there.
Right. Well, and if you think about it, like if you just say the blue car rear-ended the green car, there's no tension in that. So you have to put us into the green car, into the driver's head. You've got to see that blue car speeding up in the rear view mirror. You've got to feel that driver's shoulders tense up and the breath catch and think, oh my God, this is it, or whatever, right? So that's where the slowing down creates tension. It's the experience of being inside the moment.
Yeah, because in real life you would not be able to document that. You would. This is what I'm saying about the visual action is in your head. You've got this. You'd look up and go, oh,
right. Yeah.
In a book, you've got to be able to look up in the mirror and feel the tension, and the breath. And
sorry, that was hilarious.
And if you're listening to the podcast, you should hop over to the website and watch the video. And watch Kathryn crack up.
Sorry.
Oh no, that was great.
But this is exactly what Kathryn was describing before. The creature comes around the corner, bang, 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 done.
Right.
And so your example, Alida, I think is perfect as a way to understand what's going on there. In real life, that would all happen in 2 seconds. But on the page, it's going to take us more than 2 seconds to read about it because of the fact you've got to translate it into the words. And the words are not going to be the words, I looked in the rearview mirror, which was about 15 centimetres wide and 3 centimetres high. So I couldn't quite see all of the car that was coming, hurtling down the road behind. But I did notice there was a smudge on the mirror, and I reached up to clean, that's not the slowing down we're after.
Right.
The slowing down we're after is the thought about the kids in the back, or the bracing yourself, or the bizarre thought that comes out of nowhere. Did I have those airbags checked? In real life, that would never happen. But it's those kind of things that accentuate the danger, I think.
Right. And I like what you just said about, did I have those airbags checked, or whatever the character's thought is, because it's those specific details that can really make a scene. If you can surprise the reader with some tiny little detail that can make the scene memorable, that can give it stickiness that it might not have otherwise. Other concerns with fight scenes? Other solutions for fight scene problems?
The one thing that you do get, especially if you talk to a lot of people who are in either armed professions or first responders, is they say a mistake authors often make is trivializing wounds. And so, you've got a character who's been shot in the thigh or something, and you go, it's just a thigh wound, so they carry on for several chapters.
Yes.
Managing to defeat everyone. Well, there have got to be some consequences here.
Right.
So, and again, maybe they're a tough character, so they've got some ways around this, but
but still,
you can't have no consequences. You can't just have beaten and bloody from a fight scene, and then in the next, the next scene they're just, they're on it, It's
right.
Well, you
and
miss out on something that can provide a lot of tension that way too. Because if your character is injured, then that automatically makes them vulnerable in some way.
Right. And there's the issue of bleeding out over time if it's taking them a long time to get medical treatment, or having a tourniquet on too long that could affect the tissue below it, or infection getting into the wound. So all of those concerns that you can raise as appropriate will, increase that ticking clock in the reader's mind, kind of turn up the volume on the ticking clock. And you need continuity. So I have a writing tip on continuity we can link to, and that is a huge issue when writers put something in a scene and then drop it off the page and just kind of forget about it. And your readers aren't going to forget. They're going to be going, well, how come he just ran after a bad guy without even limping when, right. He's got a gash in his thigh.
That's right. And the bad guy just knocked the gun out of his hand. So where's that?
Mm-hmm.
So they just run off and leave the gun there in that childcare center? You can't do that.
What is that toddler playing with? Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.